You're listening to the Governors Podcast, which is hosted by school governors for school governors and for all involved in or impacted by education governance. On the Governors Podcast, we have open, honest, and transparent discussions about governance in the UK education sector, sharing and providing insights into the realities of entering the boardroom, sitting around the governing board table, and leaning in.
Okay, let's get into today's topic.
So it's a new academic year.
Yes.
It's a new season.
Yes.
And for me personally, I will be ending my first term ever as a school governor in a school.
So 4 years, you've done 4 years already?
I've done 4 years in November this year, November 22. It will be 4 years. And that only hit me a couple of weeks ago.
When you got your reminder.
Yeah, when I got an email to say, oh, do you want to be renominated as a governor? And I was like, huh? I'm looking at this email and I'm like, I'm so glad verbal response isn't recorded, because my reaction was just like, 4 years already, especially because it's the first time. So what I think would be like a great question to really kickstart this episode's discussion, but also this new season 3, and this new academic year 22-23, is how do you know the difference between being strategic and being operational? And I guess this comes from the kind of questions you ask in a meeting, or the kind of things that you put your interest in, the people that you meet and what you discuss. I guess I'm thinking as a link governor. So it's quite a broad question, I'm thinking, but one that would almost relate to everyone in the education governance space, whether they are a governor or they're not, because you need to be able to know what's appropriate to inquire about. So for you, given your experience of governance and what you do now in the present day, what would you say how can you distinguish between being strategic and being operational?
It can be sometimes a very, very fine line. It can sometimes be a blurred line, although as a governance practitioner, I shouldn't really say that, but it can be. And sometimes it is just so clear what is operational and what is strategic. And I answer like that because I'm currently an interim head of governance in one of the largest MATs in the country. And up until this point, or up until I started that, it's only 12 months covering maternity leave, I was very clear about what was strategic and what was operational, because in governance, in education, I only sat in the strategic arena. Yes. But now I'm operational as my job, whilst being around the strategic board. And it's like, sometimes it's like, okay, I need to think differently in this space. The questions that are being asked, the way in which I minute the meeting.
Oh wow, okay.
The way in which I minute the meeting, I have to make sure that I'm not bringing my operational knowledge to that. Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah, almost like feeding it in subconsciously.
And I've never had to think about like that before, because I've never been involved in school or education at an operational level. Like that. And so one of the biggest things at the moment is the exclusions guidance came out from the DfE just before the end of the summer term, helpfully, for implementation from the 1st of September. So for the first time ever, I am writing a policy, wearing an operational hat.
Yes.
As to how this is going to play out, and all of the intricacies that I've never appreciated before.
Exactly.
You know, you've almost got to work it through in your brain. If this, then that.
Yes.
If this happens, then that needs to happen.
Yes.
And you've got to, I truly, truly now understand why operationally people hate writing policies.
You have empathy now.
Absolutely. I never truly appreciated it.
Yes.
When sitting at the strategic table, because my attitude in that space was, well, you know, we've all got to operate by the policies. So just write it and make sure you get it to us on time so it can be approved.
Yeah.
That was my attitude. And so I think, and also the different hat I wear between being a clerk and being a governor. You know, I was speaking at a clerk's conference recently, and I was saying, I truly, truly appreciate when my governors, when I'm sitting in the role as clerk and my governors don't respond, I no longer view it as them ignoring me or not wanting to respond. They've got busy lives.
They've got lives, yeah. They got lives. Because you're now a governor.
I'm now a governor.
And receiving communication from a clerk.
Yeah.
And thinking, I do want to respond, and I know what it's like to be a clerk and not get a response. But at the same time, I've got these other priorities or commitments to juggle.
Absolutely. And so just being able to sit, I feel really privileged, I suppose is the word, to be able to sit in those different spaces and have a triangular view of governance in all those different spaces.
I would say it's like you're putting on different shoes. You know, when they say try stepping in someone else's shoes.
Yes.
You're literally putting on different shoes.
Yes, absolutely. Because right now, I think when we finish recording this, I've got in my diary to complete the safer recruitment training.
Yes.
For the school that I'm a governor at.
Yes.
I've also got to finish doing the model template letters for the suspension and exclusion policy for my job. And I've also got the minutes to draft for the board meeting that took place on Thursday.
Exactly. And then you're also constantly in a state of preparing for an event where you're training people on how to operate in governance.
Yeah. So it's just, you know, I think we constantly, I think it's a case when if we bring it back to the governing board table, I think it's appreciating that those who are not consistently in the education space, but are governors or trustees around the table, it's understanding the world from their viewpoint.
Yes. Yeah.
Coming into that space doesn't automatically switch you on to what is strategic and what is operational.
Yes.
I think that takes, training, but experience
being in the space repeatedly and practicing, as it were. Right.
Because you saying that you're now coming to the end of your first term of 4 years, I can imagine the distance traveled in terms of your understanding of strategic and operational.
Yes.
It's huge.
It's massive. It's massive because when I first came in, even though the school that I'm going to experience that first completion of a term in wasn't the first school I became a governor in. So I had some prior experience. I still remember my first meeting in that November of 2018 and, you know, being the newbie and feeling somewhat intimidated, if I'm honest, because there are people around the table who are just able to converse in a way that I, you know, either they knew the context of the school because they have been there for a number of years, or the professional backgrounds they have come from, and so they've operated at certain levels that I hadn't operated at because I'm different. I think that kind of plays in that diversity conversation, and how diversity can also be the different backgrounds, career journeys that people have been on. And so some people could enter the space and it feel very natural to be a part of those meetings and ask certain strategic type questions because of what they do in their day job, or historically what they've done professionally. Whereas for someone like myself, I came in and I sat around that table at the age of 23, 24, and now I'm in my late 20s, and there are newer people who have come in after me.
Yeah.
So they probably come in and sit around the table and hear me say something or hear me ask something
and think, wow.
And think, wow, she knows stuff. And I'm like, this has been graft. This has been 3-4 years in the running, but you don't necessarily realize it in that moment. It's not until you take a moment to reflect. And that's why I say, when I got that email, I was like, 4 years? Wow. Like, I've felt my growth. I've been able to see how much I've changed and the way that I approach things. I think even doing this podcast and talking about things, because I would say this podcast is a very reflective experience for me, because it allows me to take a helicopter view maybe, or step outside of the space and look in, using my experience from the inside out, if you get what I mean. So I'm able to reflect on moments I've had or exchanges I've had. And so I think for me, where I'm at is thinking, okay, I'm coming to the end of a term, my first term. What do I want my next term to look like? That's a strategic question for me personally.
Yes.
And I think that's what I am also learning, is that the whole strategic and operational conversation isn't just about the questions you ask of the senior leaders in those local governing body or governing body meetings. It's the things you ask yourself.
Yes.
It's the plan you make for yourself. So it's a case of knowing that your strategic plan starts with you as an individual governor before it can be as a governing body as a whole.
Absolutely, because the easy thing to do is be reappointed.
Just passively say yes, and just keep going.
And you keep going. But I think you're at a time in your governorship in this particular setting to say to yourself, what value have I added?
And what more can I give?
And what more can I give to this situation, to this school? How can I help? What is the direction of travel for this school?
Yes.
And is that part, do I see myself as a part of that journey?
Yes.
In terms of continuing to add value, or will I be a passenger?
Yes.
On this train just because I can?
You have to ask yourself that question, because
that's what happens. Sorry.
No, it's okay.
In my opinion, that is what happens or doesn't happen when you find people who are in the same school
for 15, 20
for
years.
3, 4, 5, 6 terms of office.
It's scary to hear that.
And it's like, why are you still here? Why are you still here? I was asking, I was delivering some training to governors recently, and I said, when they were saying to me, but Sharon, we don't want to lose the specialism. We don't want to lose, this person knows the school.
Yes.
I go, I absolutely agree. But
they occupy the space.
Every year the students move forward. Every year the students move forward. If this person, as much as you love them, as much value as they are adding, if they are not moving forward, why are they occupying that space?
And when you say moving forward, I think of it as, in the time that they've been in the school, has their title changed? Has their responsibility changed? Has the way that they engage with the school, the senior leaders, fellow governors changed? Have they created a pipeline to bring other people in? Like, meaning, like, if you know that you are struggling to get governors, is there someone on that governing body who always taps into their network to help you fill a gap?
Yes.
Or do they just sit there and they don't necessarily, so they're neither adding anything, fully engaging, progressing themselves, or bringing someone in.
They're just occupying the space.
Exactly.
They're not changing the space. You can't sit passively occupying space. It's too important. The education space, the education of our children is too important for anybody to just be sitting passively. And I'm not saying that you come to a meeting and, you're
fiery all the time and you get involved with everything.
Right. That's not what I'm saying. But if your whole thing is just coming and sitting and listening and asking a few questions and leaving repeatedly, year on year, term on term, that's a problem.
It is. And I think when you think of being strategic, or what strategic or what strategy really means, it's got nothing to do with passivity whatsoever. Like, if anything, it's the complete opposite. So for me personally, something that I'll be honest, I've been wrestling with this for the last year or two, because of, I guess, when you're in a position where you train others, or you educate others, or you try to guide others, or you do something like this podcast where you share an opinion about what others have done. So in terms of the example you gave about someone doing, like, you actually you can have readily available examples of people who have sat in the same school for 4 or 5 terms. And so I guess one of the things that hit me, knowing that I've come to the end of a term, is like, Olivia, so how many terms are you going to do in this school, given that not only do you have a strong opinion against people who are resistant to change, meaning moving and progressing, but your opinion is now public because you are you've made it public, so you're going to be held to account. You're still in that school. How long have you been there? Exactly. And so, I'm very much someone who's very comfortable with change. So new spaces don't negatively impact me, let's say. I can find a way to adapt once I kind of get a sense of the conditions or the moving pieces, etc. And so the thing that I've been wrestling with for the past year or two, very subtly, it's not like something that's been weighing on my mind or anything, is that I really love the school that I'm in.
Yes.
Really do.
I know you do.
I know, like, I really do. The way that they operate, I have a huge amount of respect for the senior leadership team, and not just what type of school it is. I think that's almost secondary, but just the way that it moves and feels. And I've noticed a lot of changes since I've been there. So, so I guess it's like being in two minds. It's like, Olivia, you love this school, and so you can see yourself doing some more years here, X number of years, don't know what that is. But at the same time, I know I'm not a passive person. I am someone who is very engaged. I am someone who is always looking at how I'm adding value. I do a lot of self-analysis, and I almost am grateful if someone voices that they want to keep me in their space because they recognize the value that I bring and the energy that I bring. So it's like, what does it look like? I guess, I don't know if this is a question for you, for us, for our listeners, or just a thought that's on my mind. So anyone who is a diehard with our podcast knows that sometimes my points can just run on. But in terms of what happens when you know you're someone who adds value, and how do you then deal with recognizing that the timeline in this particular space may need to come to an end at some point, but you can continue to add value. So you could change the setting and very easily go into another school and give. But what if you know that you still have something to give in the setting you're already in? Do you then
absolutely
change because of time? I've been here for a term and a half, 2 terms. Do I leave just because? Or do I leave because or do I stay because I genuinely feel like I still have something to give?
Remember we said sitting passively, unengaged, not adding value.
The condition of why you should go.
And why you should go. So it's not to say that everybody who's been in the same school for 3 terms, 4 terms, 5 terms should leave. Although
yeah,
I really do.
You do challenge it, yeah.
I do. You would have to seriously explain to me,
yes,
why
3-4 is a stretch, yeah.
Now, in the private sector, the UK Corporate Governance Code recommends no more than 3 terms of 3 years. So that's 9 years.
Yeah.
In the education sector, there is no recommendation. Good governance says 2 terms.
Yeah.
But nobody really adheres to that, mainly because it's usually such a struggle to get people to fill those spaces.
And stay. Yeah.
So when you do get somebody who's good and who wants to stay, you hold on to them.
Sounds like there's 2 extremes then. You either struggle to get people in and stay, or you have people who stay too long.
But I think there's 2 things that can help to remedy to some extent, maybe not solve it 100%, but remedy that. One is have a very, very strong and focused succession plan.
Yes. Yeah.
And that part of that succession plan, in my opinion, is always be recruiting.
Yes. Constantly.
So you're not just filling to vacancies or when vacancies are coming up. You are constantly promoting, advertising.
Yes.
Getting people in as observers. Keeping them on the observer bench, or what's the term in football? The extras?
Substitutes
on
the bench. The extra. That sounds like you're thinking about in an acting setting.
Right, okay,
people who are there. I was an extra on Harry Potter. But
the understudy or the sub. The backup. So that you've always got somebody. No football team would ever go out with just 11 players.
Yeah, true. I think it's about 15 or so. I say that because you have the starting 11 and then you'll have your substitutes, and they're all listed. So you know who the potential substitutes are before kickoff. So it's a case of, I think you have 1 for the goalie and then 3 outfielders or something like that.
Why is that?
So that you're never a man down.
Right.
Oh, that was so deep. That just came out so organically.
Right. So that you're never a man down. And that's the point. Why do we have vacancies? Because a failure to plan is a plan to fail. We have to have substitutes, get extras, get those who can step in, because things happen along the way. You could have somebody who starts a 4-year term, but cannot continue for 4 years. Something happens, they change jobs, they have a bereavement, they move location, whatever it is. And so we're constantly in a place where we're running to stand still. Instead of driving along the motorway calmly, because we've filled up, because we've checked our tire pressure, because the coolant is topped up, because we've serviced our vehicle. We're constantly plugging holes and and it's because we're not succession planning, waiting until we have to.
Yeah, exactly.
Until we have to, instead of when we need to.
Yeah.
Because when we are in a state of panic or desperation or need, that is when we will just, almost, when I say take anybody, I
was just about to say accept anyone.
Yeah, but it's more about filling the gap rather than, is this person going to stay? Is this person properly going to contribute? Is this person XYZ?
And then also with that, it's not even just the plug in the gaps, but then that's why you don't see change in the leadership of the strategic body, meaning that's why your chair is still the same person and your vice chair is still the same person and the chairs of each of the committees is still the same person. Because it's a case of, even with me being a committee chair, it's not to say I wouldn't be a committee chair of another committee. But at the same time, I don't know if there's anyone else who would do my committee chair position, because I'm a very open person. I like when people grow, and I'm happy to be around people who are open to growing. So if there was someone else who came to me, emailed me, or in a meeting says, Olivia, I would love to, either experience chairing a meeting, and I would just ask in the terms of reference, is that possible? Because I'm happy for someone, if they want that skill set, to develop that skill set in-house, so around the governing body table. Or if someone said, Olivia, I was new a year ago, but I would love to be committee chair. Do you mind if I nominate myself? I say, I'm not someone who pulls rank on that position. I'm not going to say no to someone, especially because I've had years of experience doing it now. So I'd happily step aside for someone else to have that opportunity. But it's whether those other people are willing to step aside or step out.
That's the second part.
In order to let those movements happen. Because if I'm now not going to be committee chair here, and the way I am in terms of someone who's quite progressive, I need to move somewhere.
Yes,
exactly. But it's whether that space is there for me to move into.
And that's the thing. Without movement, there can't be growth.
Exactly.
It just doesn't happen. And so the second path, as well as having succession planning, strong induction.
Yes.
And continuous training. And part of that training could be shadowing. But it's almost like we've got to view the governing board like we do a class or a year group.
Yes.
They have to grow. There are certain things that they've just got to do, whether the students like it or not.
Yes.
If you want to sit that exam at the end of year 11, then these are the building blocks to get you there. Right? So if you want to stay, and I've said this before, if you want to be a governor,
yes,
you have to, whether the governing board are doing it or not, you as the individual governor need to have a plan for your governorship.
So before we continue with this conversation, let's hear quickly from our sponsors, Governor Hub.
Governor Hub is proud to support the Governor's podcast. As a leading provider of online governance support, we know that confident and well-equipped governors bring about positive and meaningful change. So when you've been inspired to do your best by really leaning in on the topics that matter, you can rely on us for the tools to help your board work better, the guidance and training to develop your skills, and a secure online body of evidence for when it matters most. Visit thehoot.news to join us and feel part of something bigger.
So in terms of my own governorship, I think my term ends in next year, 2021, 2023. The end of 2023, maybe early 24. I can't remember the exact date that I was appointed. So I will spend this academic year thinking about, do I want to stay or do I want to go? I haven't taken on a committee position. The pandemic was, 2 of my years were taken up with the pandemic. But we've got our first LGB in a couple of weeks. So it's September 2022 at the moment. So, in a couple of weeks, either end of September, early October. And I know that I need to either take on a link. I have been very active. I have been involved in activities that have assisted the school in moving forward. But even though I haven't taken on a specific role, I am active in my committees and all of that. But I have to say to myself, first of all, I have to practice what I preach.
Yes.
And in my final year, what do I want to do and what does the school need me to do?
Mm-hmm.
Now, I know that my head is probably going to want me on the appraisal committee, but that's usually only one meeting or two meetings a year at the most. I'm on the finance committee and I'm on the main LGB. So I have to seriously consider becoming chair of finance.
Yes.
Which I've avoided up until now in every setting I've been in.
Why have you avoided it?
Because just, do I really understand school finance? Do I want to get into that?
Hold on.
Yeah, we're not gonna rehash a previous.
Hold on. Yeah, you see, because this is exactly where I'm going. Because I know anyone who's listening, anyone who has been a veteran to this podcast knows that we have spoken about finance a few times across the first two seasons. And so if you're like me, you're trying to think, hold on, weren't you checking me about being on the finance committee and my hesitation and apprehension and stuff? And then you've not only had that thought process and very justifiably challenged me on mine, but you've been a clerk for many years and you've clerked finance meetings, and I'm sure at one point you said those are some of your favorite meetings or can be. Exactly. So hold on.
And that's only because I don't have to think about the figures. If
you're not a participant.
right. It's very, but I'm genuinely saying, okay, Sharon, I know that I cannot enter this academic year not taking on more responsibility.
So you want to end the academic year in a position that you didn't have when you started?
Yes.
So okay.
And one of the reasons why it hasn't happened previously is because I've just got so much going on.
Of course.
Business wise, we're doing this. We've got MBGN, EGS, NAS. Plus a full-time job. Yeah. So I never wanted to position myself in such a way that I underserved any hat that I was wearing.
Almost take on more than you have the capacity for.
Right. So it wasn't that I was just sitting passively or anything.
Yeah,
like
of course.
But the head knows, the chair knows that if they need me to do anything, there was something that came up last year that they needed a governor to lead on and just take the baton and take it all the way to the finish line.
Yes.
And that required a lot of my time. But it was necessary. Yes. And a governor had to do that. Yes. So I know that I'm not a passive governor. So that there is a difference there. And I should say at this point, everything we say, we are not laying blame at anybody or making assumptions about anybody. There are always exceptions to the rule or to the norm, and these are our opinions.
I would say, even with what you've just said, prior to that statement and that statement included, is that these podcasts are not necessarily here to tell you what you should do and what you shouldn't do, but just to give you pause for thought, something for you to just consider. Because even as I've said, I don't want to speak for you, but as I've said about myself, I find these to be really reflective. So if anything, it's to ask yourselves the question: if you feel you are adding value, if you feel you are engaged, if you feel like you are taking up position and doing whatever, then if the message isn't for you, then leave it.
It's not for you.
It's not for you. That's basically what I'm saying. However, if you know that you're sitting passively, if you do that self-reflection or self-analysis and you're thinking, I don't have a justifiable reason as to why I have not done something or why I have done something, then maybe the message is for you. But it's just recognizing that we're not coming at anyone individually or collectively, but it's just to give you something to think about, because we are going through those same things. We are asking ourselves, am I doing enough? Or am I doing too much? Because that's also a question to ask yourself. It's not just whether you are taking up this position, this responsibility, but are you the person that's carrying everything as well?
Yes.
And maybe burning yourself out without even realizing until it becomes too late. So it's both sides of the coin. People who feel like they may not be doing enough, but people who are also doing too much, and finding that balance. And for me, balance doesn't always mean 50-50. It's just
absolutely not.
making sure that
Absolutely
you're serving the way that you intended to, or the way that is necessary. So yeah, that's all I wanted to add.
Yeah. So just finishing the point on the training thing, you can be really enthusiastic, you can be very engaged and contributing, but if you are a governor who doesn't undertake training, that in itself is a problem, irrespective of how long you've been there. And I know, again, we're in the round of safeguarding training and, and keeping children safe in education and, all of the standard things that we have to do. But I'm talking about things that are going to keep you abreast of what's going on
in the world,
in the education space, and how like the changes we've had. I think it's 4 or 5 different Secretary of States for education in the space of 4 or 5 months.
Really?
Yes, because when all the announcement of the Boris Johnson going, and then when the Chancellor resigned and this person resigned and the Secretary of State resigned, and then a new Secretary of State was appointed, and then I think within 48 hours they were gone. And yes,
wow,
that's happening at national level, and the impact for us on the ground is, it means any decisions that we're looking for nationally,
they could change again.
They could change again, or they're just not going to happen.
Yeah.
And so that's what I mean in terms of, and Governor Hub is brilliant for, once you're on their portal, the news feed is just unbelievable.
They keep you abreast.
Right.
They keep you abreast of what's going on.
Training doesn't have to be in a room somewhere.
Yes.
Or on a webinar somewhere.
No.
It could be you as a governor clicking onto Governor Hub if you have access to that portal, and just reading through some of the news stuff that's coming out.
I think this alludes to something that we talk about in a more explicit personal and professional development setting in our training about mind feeding.
Yes.
This is what it's reminding me of, where training is basically, when you think about coaching and feeding your mind on new ideas, new concepts, what's going outside of you, so that it will then feed you in order to serve what it is that you're in, whatever space that you're in. So it's being able to have those touch points, to be able to hear something and be able to either add opinion or connect, or have a question, or think about, okay, this thing that's happening over here, how does that affect us, the students that we serve and the staff that we're here to support?
Yes.
What does it look like for our school setting? Like, what does it look like for our academy trust when you think of trustees, etc.? Like, how does that play out here? And then if that changes, it's like, okay, how does that change make things better or worse for us? But it's, as you say, sometimes just read the headline in the email.
Read the headline. You don't have to read everything. I remember being coached years ago and being told, Sharon, you don't have to read a book cover to cover. Only novels you read cover to cover, because you need to do that to follow the story.
Yeah.
But non-fiction books, you don't need to read those cover to cover.
Jump to the chapter.
Because absolutely, I've got a book that I have never read because the title alone gave me what I needed. Feel the fear and do it anyway. I've never read that book.
Can I tell you something? I've never seen the cover, because I hear you say that and it sounds so lit on its own. I now hear myself say it and live by it. And I've never seen the cover, but this is what I mean. You read the cover, which gave you what you needed. and then you fed into me without even realizing. So you served me, which then serves my life. So now I've recognized that there's things that I will read or see, and it will just come naturally in my conversation and conversation, whether around a governing body table or I'm sat on the sofa with a family member and we're just talking about life. And so then I may have, without planning to, fed into someone something, planted a seed somewhere that they then take forward. And so that's what we mean by feeding your mind.
Absolutely. You have to feed yourself rather than, and that comes back to the passive nature. If all you're doing is sitting around the table and feeding from others, how are you feeding them? If everybody comes to the space expecting to be fed, then who's doing the feeding?
Exactly. Exactly. And I'm someone who's a firm believer in pouring from your overflow.
Oh, absolutely.
So then that reminds you, pouring from your overflow, it's secondary in terms of what you give to others. The primary aspect is what you're giving to yourself.
Yeah, it means you're filling up.
You have to fill up, because the only way you can create an overflow is by pouring into yourself first.
Yes.
So then you've got something to give. And then this links back to us thinking about our forward planning, our succession planning as an individual, as a collective. How are we overflowing? As you said, have extras. Have people who are on a waiting list to be a governor at your school.
Your school. Create the waiting list, just like how people have to, in terms of admissions.
Yes.
Like we talk about, that's the other aspect I'm going through at the moment, admissions for 24, 25. And it's like, seriously?
Wow, you're going into the future, but that's going to be a present very soon.
But you have to. And because we already know the birth rates, because the children are already in existence, then, you can make certain plans. So if we already know that we've got a skill set coming in because that person is an observer and has been an observer or an associate governor or an associate member for, the last 2 terms, then we can plan.
You know what this just made me think of? Going back to the main theme or thread of this discussion is that, and this may be a nice way of wrapping this conversation together, is even though there's a distinction between strategic and operational, and you said very early on, there's a fine line, there's a blurred line. I'd say within your operational role, wherever you are in the school, wherever you are in education, there's an element of strategy required. And within your strategic role, there's an element of operation required.
Absolutely.
It's just knowing that the balance is in the favor of the thing that you're operating in. So as a governor, you operate majority of the time in the strategic realm, as it were. But that doesn't mean it's without any element of operation, because the operation comes in when you're filling in that form. And you're submitting it. The operation comes in when you need to go into the school and engage with a member of staff about a particular department. The operation comes in when you're preparing for meetings. The strategic is the role. But it takes a level of operation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I totally,
And then in your operational role, because I can imagine the head teacher is constantly
them in
juggling, particular, juggling these two heads, these two mindsets. Because as an operational person, you are majority of the time operating in an operational capacity. But if you are a middle leader, so you're the head of a department or the head of a year, you need to be able to delegate. Strategically think about
thinking.
What outcome do you want for children at the end of the term, end of the academic year, and plan forward by starting today. What do we need to do now in order to get them there at that point? Or if you're year 7, thinking about that year 7 being a year 9 cohort in a couple of years' time. So in your operational role, you're thinking of strategy. You've got strategy built in. So I think that's basically where we're at in terms of doing it at an individual level practice it, mind feed, so you can figure out how you do it. And then that means you can then feed it into the spaces you're in, or the roles that you have, or the where you occupy. So you need to know that it's constantly a balancing game, constantly.
Oh, absolutely.
And especially if you wear different hats like you do.
Yeah, definitely. So my takeaway.
Yes, we're going to takeaways.
Is, or would be, to be very aware of the responsibility that I have in making sure that I am strategic where I need to be, and within those strategic places, what operational things do I need to do to retain that strategic role? Yes,
exactly that. I like that. That was neat. That was nice and neat.
I do try.
I think for me, my takeaway would be to really have a vision for what my second term will look like. Even if I don't know it, like I can't paint the picture perfectly, at least have a strong idea so that I have something that I'm standing by to check myself on. So as I move through each term, each academic year, each calendar year, I can have checkpoints where I'm asking myself, Olivia, are you still holding true to the vision and the purpose that you have for this next term? Because when I get to the other end of that term, if I do make it all the way through, because as you say, anything can happen, another opportunity could come up, my whole life plan could change. But when I do get to the other end of the term, that will then be 8 years.
8 years.
I will be 32. So it's thinking, okay, do I feel like even if I have more to give, do I have to do it here?
Yes.
Because that will be 8 years. A whole cohort of students have come in and left, especially because the school has a sixth form. Come in, left, and done a year at university, or a year in apprenticeships, or a year in employment. So for me, it's like making sure that I don't feel as though I haven't left it all on the table. I want to make sure I've left everything on the table.
Yeah.
And know that I don't have to be empty as my own independent vessel, but I want to make sure I've poured everything I feel that I could into that environment by the end of the 8th year. So even if I have more to give, I don't feel like I have to do it here. I can I can step out, very much like that episode we have, I think it's middle of season 2, where it's like, move on, move out, move forward, so that you can create that space for someone else coming in. So my focus could be, not saying that this is exactly what it is, could be, what connections can I make with people so that when I leave, I'm able to give the school someone or some space to tap into.
That's the succession planning. That's right. Backfill. Don't leave the space empty.
There we go.
Bring somebody in so that you can go.
There we go.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. Please rate, review, and subscribe via your preferred streaming platform. The Governors Podcast is a brand of the legal entity Education Governance Solutions Limited and a free training resource for anyone. So if you know someone who is interested in becoming a governor or a trustee, please share this podcast with them. And if you'd like to get in touch with us directly with questions or comments, then drop us an email at thegovernorspodcast@gmail.com.
You can also follow us on social media platforms at The Governors Podcast. Let's connect.